Welcome to Glasscast, a podcast from the National Glass Association and Glass Magazine. I'm your host, Katie Devlin, joined by my terrific colleague and co-host, Sarah Neiswanger. Today, we are going to be revisiting some highlights from our recent BEC conference in Louisville. This is our first episode in what I have dubbed our BEC Rewind series. We're just going to be looking back at some standout sessions from the BEC. But before we get started, I want to thank our BEC Conference 2026 media sponsor, Vitro Architectural Glass, that has helped us to make this episode possible. So back to Louisville. Sarah, how did the city treat you? What were your highlights from the home of Muhammad Ali and bourbon and baseball bats?
Yeah, Katie, I really enjoyed it actually. I was excited to begin with about our change of scenery, and I kind of left wishing I had more time there. It felt almost like a mini Nashville to me, a bit. I did get out to the Louisville Slugger Museum, in order to bring home a souvenir bat, and definitely enjoyed learning about and sampling, the city's beverage of choice, bourbon. And I heard from a variety of people too that they were either pleasantly surprised with the city and also just appreciated visiting somewhere new. But how about you, Katie? What do you think?
I loved it. Yeah, it was my first time in Louisville. I was able to drive down. I'm based in Milwaukee, so
Mhm.
it wasn't too bad of a drive. And we had some pretty nice weather. I was able to venture out to the riverfront a little bit. And yes, the bourbon tastings, the distilleries, it was a very cool experience. We were able to do a little distillery tour at Angel's Envy. It was uh, at the event from Vitro, so that was pretty fun. And yeah, I had a great time. I was glad to see someplace new.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more.
So, thinking about the conference itself, this was our 28th BEC.
Crazy.
You've been to quite a few. I've been to quite a few. What were some of your key takeaways from the conference?
Um, Really, it seemed like the event delivered on the programming this year. I think I heard that repeatedly as well, just how good the sessions were. So we also have to extend our thanks to the volunteers on the planning committee for reviewing some ideas and offering some direction to help us shape those sessions. Um, and, in general, the people conversation was a big one. We had multiple sessions addressing topics on labor, succession planning, generations. And then even in the coffee line later, it was like more ideas were percolating for people and about, well, what about this topic? We really need to ensure we are in a special industry to make sure that it continues strong into the future. So there was definitely that sentiment across both our programming at the event and what piqued people's thoughts afterward. I also just loved the nature in which like a lot of our presenters showed up. They were conversational, accessible, kind of humorous, come as you are. So it's kind of just quite enjoyable watching those folks banter on stage.
Yeah, I loved our keynote from Deidre Daniel. She had a keynote, How to Be More Interesting Than a Cell Phone. Very funny. We talked through some hard truths, perhaps, about bad conversation habits. So I appreciated that. But also very cool with Deidre. She has a big tip campaign. It's a nonprofit that gives service workers these $1,000 tips. And at BEC, she and a group of our attendees went out to dinner and were able to share a big tip with someone on staff out there. So that very cool to have Deidre a part of the event.
Mhm.
And yeah, I agree with all of your sentiments about the program. Um, with this planning committee, we want to hear what glazers want to know, what we can do with this conference. So, Sarah and I give us a give us a call, give us an email if you'd like to be involved for next year. But for this episode and the next few that come in this kind of BEC Rewind series, we want to highlight some of our standout sessions and give folks who might have missed the conference and are experiencing a bit of FOMO just a little chance to hear from some of our speakers. So in this first episode, we are going to spotlight a couple of presentations that really dug into industry succession, who takes the reins from these great glass and glazing companies when current leadership leaves the business, how do they do it successfully?
Yeah, so this particular program featured several sessions that took a deep dive into the topic. So today we're going to play excerpts from two of those. The incredible industry keynote from President and CEO of Brin Glass Company, Priscilla Koeckeritz, also known as PK to many in the industry. And then a New Gen New Rules panel moderated by Ted Baumgartner, President of Guthrie AI, and featuring Patrick Murphy, President of Texas Commercial Glass, Emily Yuckish, President and CEO of Specified Systems, and Evan Afner, President of DP Glass Company.
This topic of business succession, it's been a focus of our programming, our magazine editorial at NGA Glass Magazine for years. I mean, the association literally published the book on this topic, The Owner's Guide to Exit Planning and Succession. That was nearly 10 years ago now. And this year we're bringing that out so we can do an update because people in this industry continue to need the information. It's hugely important and relevant for companies and for businesses in general. And I like to do a check-in on stats in exit planning just every year to see how we're doing on a kind of wider national scale with our businesses. So I took a look at the 2025 stats from the Exit Planning Institute's State of Owner Readiness Generational Report. 75% of business owners surveyed for that report said they would like to exit their business within the next 10 years. 75%. We're looking out at a massive transition across our industry, across all industries in the next decade. So it was nice to have these two sessions that really told that story from a first-person perspective. So we're going to start with PK, who directly addressed the industry's transition challenges, framing it through that huge leadership transition that occurred at Brin Glass over the past 4 years.
And PK joined Brin Glass in 2021 as a consultant. And as many of you know, Brin's history goes back more than 100 years. So PK discussed the challenges, of a well-established, well-known, well-regarded company and what they faced over the last few years due to a lack of long-term succession planning. So let's take a look.
How do we prepare that next generation of leaders to take on all of these companies that we built? You see, I stepped into Brin as a consultant in 2021, and the company had gone through a lot. So those of you, Brin has been a known quantity here at NGA for a long time. But in 2019, our patriarch, Doug Nelson, so the Brin family started the company. Doug Nelson bought the company in the 70s and ran the company into really up until the point of his death in 2019. And when we lost Doug, not only did we lose that patriarch and that fiduciary expert, but in that same year, we had two more significant retirements. So we had industry expertise and business expertise walk out the door. Combine that with COVID hitting in 2020, and then, as you know, we're from Minneapolis, so the George Floyd riots, which rocked Minneapolis, and unfortunately we've continued to be in the news for all kinds of crazy reasons. But it really just changed everything economically for us. Bill Sullivan, who many of you know, who was my predecessor as CEO, he led the company through some pretty dark and difficult days. It was really hard. In mid-22, so I'd been consulting for about 18 months, he asked me to join the company full-time. And you guys will hear a little bit about my story and how I ended up accepting that challenge, not really knowing exactly what I was getting myself into. Because I thought I was joining a company to give it a facelift, right? 100-plus-year-old company, great reputation. We got lots of glazing expertise, fabricating expertise. I thought that I was just coming in to help it pivot, right? How do we do things better, gain efficiencies, operations. What I didn't realize is that the business had fundamentally changed. The way we'd run the company no longer worked. The workforce coming in, the millennials and Gen Z, they didn't think like the rest of the company. They didn't operate like the rest of the company. And around the company, people kept saying, if we could just get back to the way we used to do things before COVID, everything would be fine. So lesson number 1 for all of you, let go of the way we've always done it. This phrase makes me cringe. As I walk around the company, I still hear it periodically, and it literally makes me cringe because it's that concept, if we would just go back to doing everything the way we used to do it, everything would be fine. We'd make money. Projects would get done on time. And there's a fallacy in that. We want to build on the legacy of our experience, but we don't want to get caught in the trap of just the way we've always done it. Post-COVID, because now we're in 2020, 2021, businesses were facing new and unique challenges. People weren't in the office. Staying connected looked very different. Sales and marketing looked very different. Growing a business looked very different. Companies who hadn't made the digital leap, they were left struggling to do traditional sales activity. And Brin Glass was no different. We were facing similar challenges when I started. Our glazing company's client databases were an Excel spreadsheet that we used to send Christmas cards. Our precious client data, phone numbers, email addresses, was scattered across the company in Outlook contact databases. Even if we wanted to, we had no ability to mass reach out to our clients. Add to that, from an estimating perspective, our chief practice was to bid something, throw it out the door, and wait for the phone to ring. Now, we had a handful of very talented people who were pursuing things and had really good relationships, but we were also going through massive turnover. We tackled a variety of things in those 18 months I was consulting. We built clarity and communication vehicles. We updated the website. We built our client relationship database. We had other things that we were working on to improve how we reached out to our clients. And as we were working all these things, I had gotten invited to come sit on a senior leadership team. Now, we're a company of about 200 people, about $50 million a year in sales. And when I joined that executive team, I was the 10th executive on that team. So out of a company of 200 people, we had 10 people sitting up here on the top, meeting. And yet there was not accountability to actually get the things that we were working on from the top through the organization successfully. We were spinning our wheels. During my consulting time, as I was sitting there and looking at the leadership and watching the financial picture, I knew there was more I could do. Again, we go back, Doug Nelson, when he passed away in 2019, he was our fiduciary compass. And when the company lost that, we lost our way. And we had 4 companies all losing their way simultaneously. So when I was asked to come on board as Chief Operating Officer, I said yes, and I had a long list of things that I wanted to work on. Things that would give this legacy company a step up. What I first figured out is we were suffering from excuses across the board. It was the excuses of, it was just COVID, it's high turnover, it's price increases, it's all of those things. And I thought if we could just stop the excuses and do some operational tweaks, we're okay. We just got to tweak a few things. In 23, we worked on culture, we worked on communication. I felt strongly that the people needed to know who I was and why I was there. So I walked job sites, I walked the production floors, I got to know our glazers, tried to know all of them by name. We dug into business teams, we worked on processes, metrics, accountabilities, we turned over roles. I turned over the majority of those 10 senior leaders that I had joined. We tried promoting from within, we tried hiring from the outside with minimal success. In 23, performance was better, but there were so many things that were still broken, and I didn't even realize that the hardest efforts were still yet to come. At the start of 24, I agreed to be the successor for Bill Sullivan. I took the role of president. And we had high hopes that after 23, we were poised to take the company back to grander times, but that was not going to be the case. Q1 was okay. Q2, it felt like we were suffering setbacks. And by Q3, I realized that we had a battle on our hands. I was not coming in as a successor of a company that had a plan, that had a strategy, that had processes, systems, efficiencies. I was starting a turnaround. Business as usual was no longer usual. The way we'd gone about winning work, performing profitably, it was all gone. Margins weren't stable. Absolute everything cost more. Healthcare, labor, professional services, everything that we did to try to increase prices, it wasn't fast enough. We were locked into projects with material costs that we could never overcome profitably. Add that we had a lot of new estimators across the company. From 2021 to 2023, we turned over more than 50% of the company. Okay, so now we're a legacy company who doesn't have our legacy people. So as we were going through all of these things, and we had estimators and people bringing new processes and systems with them from other companies that didn't fit with our company culture, that didn't fit with what we were trying to do. So everything across the board was just pretty messy at the time. We weren't performing and we needed to act. Lesson number 5, when business results aren't good, dive deep. Dive deep and do it fast. You know, we weren't fast enough, and part of that was my lack of expertise on the industry. It took a little bit of time for me to understand what the cycles of a glazing company look like, and then what those cycles meant for our distribution companies, and how all of these circles were going to eventually interconnect. My experience and education in the glass industry was just beginning. And the way we worked wasn't working. So I leaned back and thought about what was lesson number 2? Surround yourself with the right experts. We needed to overhaul everything simultaneously as a company. And when I talk about simultaneously, we needed operations, we needed financial acumen, we needed people, we needed culture, we needed process, we needed training, and we definitely needed the industry expertise that was going to anchor us in being able to do good work. In January 2025, I took over as CEO. I was really blessed by this point to have a core leadership team. I sit as part of an executive team of 4 people at the top of this company at this point. We spent the last year building teams and processes. And I'll tell you, I still can't estimate a project to save my life, and these guys don't want me to anywhere near that part of the business. But I have a deeper understanding of what it takes to go to market. And I know more about glazing and fabrication from our glazers and fabricators than I ever thought would be necessary.
Yeah, I loved that from PK. Let go of the way you've always done things. And this can be so hard no matter how long you've been in business, what age you are. We just, as humans, we tend to feel comfortable doing things the way we have always done things. So there's that challenge for leaders in a transition. But also, you've got to find your people, focus on culture, and work with that team to dig into your processes and address any challenges that you're having.
Yeah, that's not a small ask. But it was fun working with PK on developing the session. I know we kind of debated a Shark Tank concept with her at some point in the future that I hope we can bring to everybody. But in general, her insights, especially coming from a consulting background, could be very helpful to so many. So now let's move on to the New Gen, New Rules panel. This was a group of 4 leaders, all next-gen leaders, discussing what it means to take the reins at a family company. So this was a favorite session of so many people at the BEC conference. We continued to hear afterwards. What does it mean when a business matriarch or patriarch hands down the company to the next generation of leadership? What are some of the challenges, big and small, with that transition? How should outgoing leaders be involved in running the business, if at all? That was kind of a funny point of conversation throughout. And what are some of the challenging dynamics with siblings or other family members? And then outside of the family element of it, how do you demonstrate to the longtime employees that the next gen leader is ready to take the reins and establishing that belief and trust?
Yeah, honestly, Sarah, I think we should have the same group back to BEC every year for
Mhm.
a reprise just to check in on how they're doing.
Mhm.
Um, I think that this topic really just is so resonant. We have so many family businesses in glass, and to be able to just hear people talk very honestly and openly about what that looks like from a business perspective, but also an interpersonal perspective. But for this podcast, I would like to run the whole session, but having to pull out an excerpt, I thought we could just highlight the panelists' transition stories from that high level. What is the makeup of their business, and through what process did they manage their transition? So let's take a listen.
Thank you to NGA for having us. For those of you who don't know, I'm Ted Baumgartner, Guthrie AI. I had the privilege of growing up in a glass family. My mom, Lynn Guthrie, started Guthrie Glass and Metal 40 years ago, and I had a front row seat to the transition from her leadership to my brothers. And so when Max was talking about bringing some folks who experienced something similar, I was excited to be able to have this discussion because I feel that I saw that in the first person. So to get started, why don't we introduce ourselves, and Evan, tell us a little bit about your company, when it got started, what kind of work you guys do,
Yeah.
and a little bit about that history.
Yeah, so I'm Evan After, president of DP Glass in San Diego. We do commercial storefronts and curtain walls, stick and unitize. It's me, my dad, and my brother. My dad started in 2008. Me and my brother are in the transition period, trying to get him to play a little bit more golf, but it's proven a little harder than we thought. So we're in that transition period right now, and as Max said, I started my career in structural engineering, went into the civil industry and was designing bridge false work, and then my brother, I had the opportunity to work with my brother and really see him every day and see my dad every day, and I took the opportunity, and yeah, we've been cruising since and trying to figure it out. So.
Emily?
I'm Emily Ukish with Specified Systems, President and CEO. We are I'd say medium commercial glazing contractor in the Pittsburgh area. We do low to mid-rise curtain wall, storefront, specialty items, things like that. I've been in the business for about 17 years now. After college, I worked outside the industry, then got pulled back in by my dad about a year after that, and have been working my way through pretty much every aspect of the business until landed a couple years ago in this role.
Yeah, and I'm Patrick Murphy. I started, I guess, if you want to call it started, 2004 in the field. The company was founded in 2004. I kind of got brought on to help as a very cheap labor source, and started full-time after college in 2010, so I've been at it about 16 years now. Similar to these guys, got your feet wet in the field. Same in the office, kind of just doing purchasing and step into the APM, then PM, then operations, kind of work your way up in a manner that most of you would expect. And as far as what we do low to mid-rise, a lot of K through 12 schools, hotels, government buildings, courthouses, you name it. So we're a very diverse portfolio, do all over the state of Texas, but it works well for us, allows us to ebb and flow with the economy and the shifts in year to year.
Yeah, so before we get into the transition plan and the assuming leadership and all of that kind of stuff, I think one thing that I'd like to dive into a little bit is what motivated you guys to work in the family business. I mean, I think there's a lot of folks who decide it's not for them, and there's a lot easier ways to make money, which I'm sure everybody in here would agree with, that the glass business is very challenging, to say the least. So what motivated you to say, hey, this is what I want to do?
For me, it was working with my brother. Shout out Bucks in the crowd. We've been best friends forever, and so I thought it'd be a great idea to work alongside. And then it's really hard, it turns out. Family business is really hard. So yeah, as I said, I'm president now. I'm 1 year in, and some of the greatest challenges are kind of developing people and turning your business into an organization. But when your dad started, you know, and he knows the craft, he doesn't really know or ever wanted it to be something bigger than what me and Buck wanted it to be. It's difficult because we may be in meetings and, you know, my dad's still trying to cowboy things, you know, the way that he knows how to do it, and, you know, we're trying to create something that can stand on its own, so that wrestling period is tough, but yeah, I just wanted to be around my family every day, and I'm grateful that I get to talk to them and see them every day, so.
Yeah. Emily, what about you? What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I got in just because I was asked to come in and I had nothing better to do, you know, but.
You told me that your dad offered you like a 50-cent raise or something like
yeah,
that.
I was making $11 an hour and he offered me 12.
Yeah.
But I came in and started to move around the company a little bit, started to develop relationships, and I mean, I was pretty much hooked after that, and it turned out I was not bad at it either, which also helped, and things came pretty naturally to me once I started digging into it and forming the relationships with, you know, with vendors, with customers, with my fellow employees, you know, and that's where I think the reason you stay is for obviously the success of the business, but all of those relationships that you made along the way. I think those are incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
I got started similar. I was at a hardware store making $6 an hour. My dad offered me $7 to come help him load glass and haul it to a job. So naturally, at 17 years old, that's what I did. I remember I got my first 2-week paycheck. It was a handwritten check for $599. It was the most money I ever saw in my life. And so I came back every Christmas break, every summer break. And as most of you know, it gets in your blood, and you kind of just, you're in it at that point. So like I said, every holiday was back to work. Every break was back to work, and, you know, sometimes after school and weekends during school. So midway through college, as I was getting into my core classes, I got into business management to really focus on what could help that company. I think at that time we were doing about $5 million a year, very small, Walgreens and things like that. And so, you know, aspirations, ambitions, and I was at a place in college where I could, you know, gather some resources to apply in the next phase, which was moving into the office and trying to help build the company. So,
did your folks push might be the wrong word, but was there an expectation that you joined? And I guess we'll stick with you, Patrick. And I think for context, you know, I know there's a lot of folks out here in the audience who are in the middle of a transition, who are considering having their kids work with them, having their family work with them. Some have started that process, but are still, you know, years away from the transition. So, yeah, what was the sort of expectation, if any, you know, growing up or in college? Did you have any of that?
Yeah, it was expected. You know, there was three employees. 2 of them were the co-founders. So it was, you know, I'm a 17-year-old. I'm the oldest boy. It was, you go to work. It was a form of punishment sometimes where I'd break bones or make mistakes as a kid, and you go to work to pay that off and learn your lessons. So expectations were absolutely there. They got compounded over the years, you know, in a good way, and you know, that's kind of what keeps you going. You know, the expectations kind of transition from the owners or the father or whatever it may be to the company and the needs of other people, you know, next to you, under you, whatever it may be. And so expectations are everything in the company from the beginning to now. So yeah.
Yeah, and Emily, I mean, for context, so my mom started Guthrie Glass and Metal. There's not many women. There weren't many women in the industry then, and you know, we're doing better. We're still not there. So I got to imagine, you know, growing up as a woman, you know, when did did you feel like this was something that you always wanted to do, or you always saw yourself, you know, being able to be a leader in?
No, not exactly. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and that's part of the reason I ended up where I ended up. And I don't think there was ever an expectation that I was going to take over the company. It just ended up falling into place that way for me, and I loved it, and I had been in it. I grew up in the industry. My dad started the company in 1992. I did work, I worked summers. I cleaned the office, I mowed the lawn. I ran deliveries, but it was never forced on me either. So I always had the decision. It was always in my hands of whether I wanted to continue on or whether I wanted to walk away.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Evan?
Shoot, I was making cash at 14, 15, doing jobs, in between school breaks and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I don't think my dad ever wanted me to be in the business, not for anything other than, he wanted what was best for me. And so he kind of pushed me to actually be a structural engineer. But I'm glad I found my way back. One, because I think being a business owner is probably the hardest thing. Maybe besides being a husband and father, maybe, I don't know. Being a business owner is really hard, so if you make it through, you just have an immense amount of tools for life, and so I'm really glad that I found this trade, too. I think glazing is the coolest trade out there, and so I've grown to love the trade as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the leadership transition and how, because you guys are all the presidents or CEO of your companies. Was that done formally? Was there I know, well, actually maybe we start with you, Patrick, because I know you've talked a lot about how you really went through a really formal transition period with a stock buyout and really lined up financing. Can you talk about how that process went and what you thought you did well?
Well is relative. I think there's not a one size fits all with succession. We've learned, my dad's got more industry knowledge than anybody I know, 40 plus years, but when we stepped in this direction, we had no idea what we were doing. And we have ideas where we're on the same page with things, and then we could take it to the wealth management guy or the lawyer, the legal team, and they come back, and then you kind of restart all over a little bit. So yeah, there's a gifting portion of it. There's employment agreements. There's stock buyout. It's a jumbled pile of how do we make this work that's the most palatable for the company itself. And then obviously we want to take care of him and the legacy he's built and send him off properly into retirement. But then you got to do that over a certain amount of time where the company can sustain it. So it's been I wouldn't say we've done it formally. I would say it's been. Frankly, it's a 3-year process to date, and we're still ironing out, what we have a 13-year plan in place, but we're still kind of
13.
Wow, 13. Yep. Yeah. And again, 3.5 years into it right now. The ownership's transition's there. However, there's still, again, the buyout, the gifting, the stock, the monetary portion of it. We stretched it out the best we could, again, for the company's benefit. So it's tricky. There's no right answer. I've learned that from talking to a lot of people. So.
Yeah, and Evan, I remember you saying that you kind of were on the other end, and you guys kind of got in a room and were like, "Hey, let's figure it out."
Yeah.
How did that go? Is it something you'd recommend? Do you recommend doing it more like Patrick? What do you think?
That's a loaded question. I guess I was lucky enough. These guys are a little bigger than me, and so I was lucky enough to join early in the company to where I could have sweat equity, and then we got to a point, 5 or 6 years in, to where we were able to start divvying up equity equally among us three, and at that point, it all felt earned, and so, you got to earn it, and that's another thing that I recommend is that you know the trade and know all sides of the business. So. For me, I got to learn sales. I got to learn project management. Now I'm learning a lot of financial literacy, and I'm just learning the whole entire thing. And really only a year into president, but yeah, I was lucky enough to join a little earlier to where I could sweat into my equity.
I think you said something about that your dad had taught you about the trade, but he didn't necessarily teach you how to run a business. And now you're stepping in and learning that next level of what it means to be the president of a company.
Yeah, and that's kind of the same deal with you guys. We're kind of building it together. So my dad, my brother, and I are also learning how to run a business and how to have standard operating procedures and things like that. I'm just like, we didn't have process, so now we're building it together.
So obviously, this topic of business transitions at the ownership, the leadership level is so important. And I'm grateful to PK and to our panel, Ted, Evan, Emily, Patrick. Thank you so much for joining us at the BEC and for sharing your stories. For now, that wraps up this BEC Rewind episode of Glasscast. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you, Katie. This was fun. And in our next Rewind episode, we'll get highlights from our architect one-on-one conversation between NGA's president and CEO, Lakeisha Woods, with architect Tim Hawk.